right, I do believe we are live. Welcome to the stream, everybody. So for those who don't know, my name is David. I do these live coding streams focused on Rust. We've been having a bit of a break for the last couple of weeks, but we're gonna get back to it starting this week. So the project that we've been working on for the last couple of weeks is this project here on GitHub called Wither. It's basically sort of a Twitter clone built in Rust, and the sort of unique thing about it is that we're building both the backend and the front end in Rust. So the backend is a regular web application built in Rust, and the front end uses WebAssembly through this Rust framework called Seed, which basically allows you to build front end apps completely in Rust. And so since we're building both the front end and the back end in the same language, we're able to actually have sort of a shared library where we're able to share types between the backend and the front end, which are obviously in Rust, which is kind of cool. This is mostly sort of an experimentation with how it actually feels to build stuff in WebAssembly. I'm not sure that I advocate that you'd actually build stuff for like actual production use in WebAssembly. It's just sort of to check it out. So we've had a couple of issues open. We used to have like a to-do file somewhere in the repo, but I moved those to issues since the last stream. And I figure we would make sense to sort of go through them and just look at what we actually have to do. Actually, let's go into the backend first to see what we have done. So this is maybe I should show which crates we're using on the backend. So we're using async IO, async await in Rust. The web framework we're using is Tide. Should probably see if there's a more recent version. I do believe there is. We're using SQLX, which is an async database library. And then we're using a bunch of other crates. .env to load environment variables, some logging stuff, serialization, error handling stuff, miscellaneous things. The main ones are like Tide, async SD, and SQLX. On the front end, let's see. I obviously mentioned that we're using Seed. That's the framework that we're using. We had to fix it to a certain version, a certain Git ref that wasn't quite released yet because we ran into a bug. And we haven't built that much on the front end yet. We're sort of building out the back end first. And then once that is sort of in a working state, then actually in sort of a useful state where you can do real stuff, then we're going to look into the front end. So for the last couple of streams, we're focusing on sort of getting the backend set up, actually ready to do work. And then I believe last stream, we started actually building out some real functionality. So we've done authentication. We've made where you can follow other users. You can get back a list of like who you're following or who a certain user is following and who their followers are. And you can obviously get yourself. And then we've made an endpoint where you can actually create tweets. And we do have tests for all of these, which is kind of nice. So if we look at this list of features, we have a couple of to-dos here that I think it would make sense to sort of address first. Probably this one is a good place to start, just to sort of get back in the flow of things. So currently, I do believe the way that we're writing tests in the backend, we have this, what's a good example of this? So we have this get method, that takes a URL, and then it returns a test request. And a test request you can then call .sendOn, which is an async function. It takes the test server. Does that make sense? Yeah, so when you actually set up the testing setup, this is a bit funny, but so in order to actually get a test server, you call this test setup function that does a bunch of setups, sets up some environment variables, some logging, and then also creates the database for that particular test to use, and then it gives you back a test server. So that's where that comes from. And then it's basically just sending a sort of fake HTTP request to that server, getting back a response, pulling out the headers, doing stuff like that. So currently, the test request returns just a response, which is a thing from Tide, I believe. And so that means that if we have to actually convert that response into JSON, we have to call this body JSON method, which I believe is one that we added in an extension. Yeah. So this, like, if you basically look at our test, we do this basically every time. You can't really do much with a response without actually looking at the body. So I figured it would be nice to actually make send a bit more ergonomic and have it return a tuple of the response decoded as JSON, the status, and the headers as a hash. So I think we should actually get to do that first before we start adding too many tests. There's one other thing I would like to fix first, and that is currently, it's a bit odd, but when you run the tests, it actually prints out a whole bunch of logs. I'm not quite sure where that comes from. It seems like it's all the database statements. So I'd like to fix this first because it's kind of annoying. We could obviously just disable logging entirely in tests. I don't think that's a great solution though. Like, that should do it. And by the way, if there's any questions, just put them in the chat and I'll address them. So that works. I haven't seen this problem before, that logs are printed during tests, so I'm wondering if it's specific to this logger here, or if there's anything sort of funny that we're doing. The logs, I believe, are coming from actually creating the test database, where it makes a Postgres database. That Postgres database is deleted in the drop implementation for TestDB. This is basically a way to sort of keep each test isolated on their own separate database. It also means they can run in parallel rather than sharing the same database with multiple connections and transactions and that stuff. This is it's sort of a different approach that we're trying. Create DB. I wonder, like, what's the log level? Log level is debug. These are all debug logs. So warn. There's no trace logs. I think I am going to try to use a different logger just to see if that works. I believe there's the one I've used the most is called envlogger. Let's just see if that makes any difference. And we're obviously not going to be able to compile that. Envlogger init. I wonder if this returns like an error or something. Let's pull up the docs. This function panics if called more than once or if another library has already initialized a global logger. Yeah, that's not going to work because we call this test setup multiple times from different tests. You probably have like a try init or something. Yeah, try init. Let's call that instead and say .ok to just ignore the result. We have one more error, which I believe is from main. So here we do actually want to call init in case it fails. That is very weird. Why does it print? Normally, Rust captures all standard output. You know what? I'm actually not going to deal with that now. We're just going to comment this out. Bring pretty end vlogger back. And then we're just sort of going to comment out the logger. And then we could probably make an issue to actually figure out what's going on. The test should pass. It's taking an awful long time. Did we just break it? That is weird. I have no idea why it's hanging. There's a question, could you use log middleware from Tide instead? Good question. I don't know what that does. Log all incoming requests and responses. This middleware is enabled by default in Tide, so it is enabled. I think basically what this does is it integrates with the log crate, the sort of standard log crate in Rust to actually do the logging, but you still have to set up an actual sort of library or whatever that will actually pick up these logs and actually make them go wherever you want them to go. So this middleware itself does not do the logging. I'm curious, like, why is it hanging? That is extremely annoying. We saw it work a few times. I do have this script to remove test DBs. Bin backend. That's annoying. Is it because we're using too many threads? It does not run in parallel. Like that, it takes way longer. It does finish. It would suck if we had to run the test like that. So that hasn't failed on us yet. And now it hangs. That's super weird. I will add an issue for that and then I'll look into it later. For now, we'll have to run it with test threads. I believe there's an environment available that you can set for that. No? Isn't there like Rust test threads or something? Whatever. So the way I normally run tests is by hitting leader T in my in Vim. I have it set up to run this this command, run Rust tests, which I have in my dot files. Oops, it's right here. Cargo test all. We'll just add this test threads thing. By the way, need trig. I saw your set a flag for that crate with a long name that I can't pronounce. In cargo.toml, if you set a crate to always be compiled up level 3. Is that something that I missed, or are you suggesting that I do that? I'm not quite sure. So now we're actually able to run tests again. It's super weird. Why were they halting? That was the weirdest thing. Figure out why tests hang when run on multiple threads. We should probably also add an issue to bring back logging and tests. All right. I don't think I need to set a higher optimization level for that crate specifically. I guess if we really cared about performance, that's something that we could look into, but I think we're fine for now. Thanks for the suggestion though. Does that hurt compile time a lot, or does it just like not hurt compile time? I suppose doing more optimizations would. So we're able to run tests. That's good. It's annoying that it takes a while. All right, so it was test respond, test response, send, test request send. Should return value, status code, what is this headers thing? Hash map. So that gives us the request. We can get the body like so. Headers. Header values. How do we pull the headers out of a response? Oh yeah, by the way, there's a new version of timeout, I believe. We should probably update to that one. Response. Header names. Iter. An iter visiting all header pairs in arbitrary order. Alright. Headers. What does it iterate over? I'm thinking we have to like collect it into a hash map or something like that. Header name, header values. Oh yeah, that's such a weird thing that like each header value in Tide actually has multiple. It's an iterator itself of values. That is odd. I suppose we could just panic if there's multiple. We could also expand this into an iterator of header name and header value, and if there's multiple values for a given header, then the latter one will just sort of override the former ones. Let's do that. So that makes this a flat map. Key values, and then header values is an iter of values. Values iter map. You have to turn the key into a string. Header name as stir. We can probably do the same on the header value. Values iterator of header value as stir. May outlive. Key is borrowed here. I'm not sure if this is gonna fix that. I don't think we can move it into it either. Which does not implement copy. Closure may outlive the current function. It borrows key which is owned by the current function. Suppose that is true. If we collect this into a vec, does that fix it? It does. So the issue here is that key is a reference to a header name, and then we get the string slice version of that, and then can we move here? Yeah, so currently this is a reference, right? And then we reference that in here, but for some reason, like this inner, it can't infer that this inner iterator actually, like this value supposedly gets dropped here, right? Which means that this iterator, this closure, which gets called later at some other point, it happens to be called right down here. But at that point, this reference is actually gone out of scope as well, I think. Whereas if we move it, so I suppose currently this is a, I'm honestly not sure. Like this ownership and stuff with iterators is pretty difficult. I wonder, can we do a stir here now? Can. To tell you the truth, I'm not quite sure why. Because, so key is a reference, which we are able to copy. I think it has to do with the fact that if we don't have the move, then it makes a reference to key, so a reference to a reference, and that sort of first level reference might not live long enough, because it only lives as long as, like, it dies right here, I think. Whereas if we move it, it actually, because references have copy semantics, is able to copy the reference into it. So now instead of a ref, we just get a single ref, which is borrowed from like the outer iterator itself, I think, and therefore it lives long enough, I guess. And body JSON probably takes self by value. Yeah, so here we're moving self and here we're using it afterwards. So we should just be able to move this one down there. And that works. Then we need the status. Get that like that. We can say JSON headers status. Is status headers like that, and then we need to update all these references. So this is JSON status, something we don't care about. We do actually care about the headers. So we want content type is headers, like that. And JSON we already have. Very nice. Here we just care about the status. Same deal here. Update these tests as well. JSON status. There we go. Same here. Wonder if you could write a Vim macro to do this for you. Like that. So while we're doing this, what have people been up to this weekend? Status. You see why we're doing this now and not when we have a gazillion tests, right? Almost there for this file. Status headers. I think for the next file we should try to write a macro for it. Whoops. All right. Posting. Same deal here. Could we write a macro for it? Let's just give it a shot. QQ JSON status nothing. This one becomes status. This one gets deleted. I think that worked. User creation. All right. A macro assumes that the line that does the parsing is on one line. Data? Was that correct? This one doesn't actually parse it into a value, it parses it into something a bit bigger. All right. JSON status nothing. Status. That should be easy enough. Insert a JSON from value, I believe you can do. Data. Yeah. So this API response thing is just sort of a generic serializable thing that just has a data inside it. So in terms of like the response from the server, it just serializes into like data and then it contains the actual response in here. It's just to not have everything like nested in the root. So this is a generic thing that can be used to both create the response and actually deserialize it on the front end. And you can see this is in the shared crate, which means it's used on both the front end and the back end. I think that was everything. We're still recording a macro. Oh my god. Oh, there's a bunch of tests that failed. We should also remove those warnings. Login invalid token. All right, let's rewarn just that one. Strange that if you put stuff after, like after the last argument here, it works. We saw it hang just before. Does that mean that it also hangs occasionally with test threads equals 1? Yeah, it's hanging again. God damn it. Alright, that's wonderful. Unwrap colon error. Can parse body into value. Right. So it's not actually all the time that we care about the body. Which test is this? Login is with invalid token. So this one doesn't actually care about the body at all, and the body doesn't even get set. Which I suppose is actually an error in and of itself. You should always get an error in the body. It just gets no body. I wonder, let's look at the endpoint. So it's calling user post user session. Calls login. JSON body. I suppose this, that's the payload with invalid token. Invalid token, that's because it doesn't set the auth token header. Logging with unknown user gives 404. Yeah, you have to set the authorization header. Where does it? Wait, it doesn't even log in. It's only if you're logging in. So that is, that's the create user and authenticate. Username. That just sets the default username to Bob. It's sort of weird that we're providing it down here, but we're not also setting it up here. We're just relying on the default. Let's change that. Bob to string. In fact, let's say username. Just pull it out in the variable. User name. Like that. Password. So this test name is actually lying to us. It's not invalid token. It's logging with invalid password. Like that. Invalid auth header. And this is also not logging in. This is authenticating. Authenticating with invalid auth header. Logging in without auth header. Authenticating. Whoa. authenticating without auth header, authenticating with invalid header, that's because it doesn't say Barra there, it says foo, right? You can tell it's been a while since I've been in this codebase. I think we're actually good to fix this test now. We should probably do the same extraction here with the username, not up here because the user doesn't actually exist. Not here either because we're just calling /me and getting the user off the auth token. And this is fine either. Fine as well. All right. Oh yeah, the problem was that there's no body, which there totally should be. Wait. And we've changed the test name. Like that. It still fails for the same reason. So every time I print out what the body actually is, so here you can see the body is empty for some reason, which we obviously can't parse into a JSON, which makes it fail. Here we call send, which then tries to parse the body there, so that's what fails. I do remember that we have some sort of middleware that turns all errors into data, like into an actual response body. We have this one, error response to JSON. I wonder why that isn't kicking in. It's because of this course middleware? I don't think so, because I believe middlewares run sort of front to back. So the last one that you add is the first one that runs. I believe we tested that at an earlier stream. Interesting. Let's try just adding a panic here. See if that fails. It does, but is it from this request though? It isn't. It's probably from this one. Is that the one that fails? So if you set the environment variable Rust backtrace equal to 1, then you get a more detailed backtrace, and we can see more what's going on. Basically looking for anything in our test suite. Test login, login rs60. Test helpers 147, that's where we saw the unwrap. Login 60, what's that? That is this one. All right. is it called twice? Ah, right. That's because the middleware is called, like, we're actually doing two requests. We're doing one request from within here and one request from here. And so this middleware runs, like, actually gets the response, and if it's an okay, then it doesn't do anything. Whereas if it's an error, then it decorates or changes the response. So obviously it runs both on successful responses and on failures, which is why we're seeing it twice. Says in the docs, middleware can only be added at the top level of an application and is processed in the order in which it is applied. Interesting. Maybe I misremembered. Let's just give it a shot. So that's the middleware and the cores middleware. So many tabs. Put one in there. Oh yeah, right, I was misremembering. So it runs the middlewares, like the docs are correct, they run in the order they're applied. Which means the cores middleware might have something to do with it after all. Wait, no, because if we turned it on, it didn't do anything. All right, let's try to actually look at this error here. That is extremely annoying that the tests are hanging. It doesn't print anything. Why does it not print anything? Because it's not an error. I suppose that makes sense. Where was the endpoint again? Login. So it's because it can't match the password. Right, that's because it's actually not a failure. It returns an OK. Which is why the error handling middleware thing never actually gets hit, because it's just up here. We just never set a body on the response. We should do that. Or can we fix this in a middleware? I wonder if we can get the body. What type is this? It's a response. Take body. Take the response body as a body. All right. Next. Mute. We could technically... Can you get, like, empty? Nah, is empty. Option motions. True, the body has a length of 0, false otherwise. When does it return none? Length map. Length. Get the length of the body in bytes. Length sum 0. When can it be none? Length. Length. One of the details of body to be aware of is the length parameter. The value of length is used by HTTP implementations to determine how to treat the stream. If a length is known ahead of time, it's strongly recommended to pass it. Content encoding. So that means into JSON, from JSON. So that's because the length might be unknown. Length, bytes length. So if for some reason, like, you build a response from a file or bytes or whatever, where for some reason you can't figure out how long it actually is, then length would be none. What I'm thinking is that we could take the body, check if it is none. If it is none, then we can build our own sort of error response from the status code instead. Let's see if that works. If is empty, unwrap or else, unwrap or, let's say that, let's just call unwrap, expect no length on response body. So if the body is empty, then we want the status code. Status. Status code. They do implement display. What should the message be? Something went wrong? Should probably set the status code down here as well. That should fix our test. Why not? I wonder what take body does anyway. Does it give you like a clone of the body or what? It does have a length. Why does that not get printed? Am I running the right test? Log in with invalid password. I'm wondering, like, why am I not seeing all these lines being printed? Is that request that fails now? Why? Why does this request fail? That works. That's probably because take body sets the body to like an empty body or something. It replaces the body. And there's no else here that sets the body back. Take body. Take the response body as a body. Self res take body. What is res? HTTP response. I believe HTTP is this crate called HTTP types. GP types. Response. Replacing it with an empty body would be really great if they wrote that in the tide docs. Alright, so we have to set it back. That makes sense. That test should pass now because we commented out the second half. And it does. That passes now too. Let's just print the body so we're sure we're not crazy. I believe you can say no capture. Like that. All right. Let's actually match on it as well. Assert JSON include. We expect an error with a status of 4.3 and a message. Something went wrong. And this is the expected. The actual is the JSON. Is that because it's status code? Yep. All right. Status code is strictly not necessary, but it's nice to have regardless. I think there were like a few other tests that failed. Yeah, there's the one more. Authenticating without auth header. It's also in login, line 4. No entry found for key. Is that this guy that we're hitting? Ah, the headers all get lowercase. Great. All right. That refactoring took longer than I expected. Let's just clean these up. See middlewares. follows. Middlewares follows. And some in the front end. There we go. Whole bunch of semi-mechanical changes. This guy. This should close automatically. Next up, map invalid data error to some 4xx response. Right. So I believe in what's a good example? Create tweet. Yeah, so right here we get a request and then we parse the body as and we serialize the body as JSON into this create tweet payload type that basically just has a text. But if that fails, we return an error, which will be mapped to a 500 error, which actually should be a 400, some sort of client user error, right? So I think it would make sense to do that next because it will probably have an impact on, like, there will probably be code changes. So we're going to want to do that having the fewest like endpoints, so we don't have to change all of them later. I wonder if we could make a test for it. Posting a valid tweet. Tweet that's too long. Posting a tweet with exactly max length. Whoops. Well, let's just put it in posting tweets for now. I'm just like the test that we're adding is not strictly related to tweets, but rather how the server handles invalid data. Gets mapped to a, what's an HTTP client, like bat request? Is that just a 400? Bat request. Response code status indicates that the server cannot process or will not process the request due to something that is perceived to be a client error. Malform request syntax, invalid request message formatting, deceptive request routing. I wonder what that is. But this totally sounds like what we want. Invalid request message. Malform request syntax, I guess. Something like that. It gets mapped to a 400. And do I use Rust at work? Mainly Scala, but we're experimenting with some smaller projects in Rust, yes. I have built some small like developer tools that we use for different things. This takes a body T where T is serialized, which means it can technically be a JSON. And then it should give a 400 with an error. Status code 400. message invalid payload, I guess. That is so annoying. Field missing text. That's actually a better error message. Let's steal that. Seriously. Unprocessable entity. Which HTTP status code is that? It's 422. Where does that error get returned? Sometimes I wish I had breakpoints. It doesn't even get printed. Wait, create tweet. Alright, so body JSON does get called. 422. Ah, so it just failed there. So it doesn't get mapped to a 500. I thought it did. To be fair, the issue is, I think we ran into that like the very first stream that we started building this project. So it might have been changed in a more recent Tide version. It might have, like, we might have just sort of missed it or whatever. Well, the payloads get mapped to the right status code. To the right error response. All right. Those are the easiest bugs to fix when you figure out there's nothing wrong in the first place. So, all right, I do believe that before we move on, we should update Tide to 11. Just a new async std. 16.2, we're on that. SQLX 3.5. I believe last stream or 2 streams ago we spent quite a while updating to the latest Tide. I wonder if they have Release notes. We can see what actually changed. Maybe there's something that we can make use of. Probably in the repository. Nope. Maybe in the releases. Added request set body. Now we use the response set body. Does cargo add sometimes miss version updates? Not sure what you mean. Can you update dependencies with cargo add? So the reason that it didn't update, I ran cargo update earlier today. And the reason it didn't update tied is because we specified that we specifically want version 0.10.x. So it'll bump the X, it won't actually bump this one, the minor version. I'm not sure how you can get it to specify the minor version. I guess you could specify this version as any version less than or equal to 1, I think. There's probably some flag that you can give to cargo to make it do the right thing. Fixed and unwrap in SSE. Service and events, I believe. Hey David, what's your Vim setup? So you can find my dot files are on GitHub. It's just I have a repo called dot files, and they're all here. I think if you post like !config or something like that in the chat, it'll post a link to it. But I use NeoVim and the I use COC for completion and Rust Analyzer. That's basically it. And there's a Rust Vim as well. Yeah, that question comes up a lot. That's why the command is there. All right, I don't think there's anything that we need to worry about here. I think we should actually get started on building stuff. Bump to latest tied. I would like to actually look into this one. I need to try raw Vim instead of VS Code extension Vim. Just need to get it configured correctly. Yeah, like Vim out of the box is rough. It takes quite a bit of config to actually make it usable. I've personally never used VS Code. I've played around with like other editors and their sort of Vim emulation mode, but I find that if you're used to like real Vim, like those tiny ways in which the emulation modes are different just sort of feel very wrong. It's like it almost works, but kind of doesn't. And Vim has like thoroughly broken me. I can never use an editor without those Vim key bindings ever again. Right, let's look into the timeline. So I figure the timeline should include, like, it's some endpoint that you can call to get every like tweets in chronological order from people you follow or tweets that you've posted yourself. Let's add a test module for it. Timeline. Just steal some existing tests that we have. C's own tweets. How did we actually post a tweet? It's sort of annoying that we have to set this header every time. .token. Create and authenticate returns a user, right? A token response. Yeah, like it would be cool if we could say, if we could like call some some method. And then be like post as user, like that. And then it would just automatically set this header for us. You could look into that. For now, we're gonna have to do this. That's the token. Oh, we already have that. Great. I don't really care about the name. Let's just call it token. Like, I like calling it like Bob token, Alice token, Cindy token, whatever, if you have multiple tokens. I've tried using other people's config maybe 4 times. It always breaks down. Yeah, what I recommend doing, there is a, what's it called, Vim Sensible, I believe. So T-Pope or Tim Pope makes like lots of Vim plugins, and he has this Sensible, which is basically sort of a Sensible starter pack for Vim. It's a plugin that you install, and it basically makes Vim sort of tolerable out of the box. And then what I recommend you do is you read through other people's Vim configs, and hopefully they're commented, and then you steal what you like, but you build your own config up from scratch, so you actually know what you're getting. I don't recommend just forking someone's config files, because then you don't know like what is Vim and what is their config, and what does Vim actually like to use. There's one plugin that I do recommend you get though. It's called Vim Plug, I think. It's like a plugin manager for Vim for easily installing plugins. Without that, installing plugins is very annoying, which is what I use. Create a tweet as that user. Don't really care about the response either. Then we can get, should you be able to get other users' timeline? Probably not. Me timeline? What does a tweet look like? Should probably have more than one. Let's see, this is newest, middle, oldest. Let's make a function called post tweet. That does this. Server is a test server, I believe. Like that. Newest. middle oldest. Get the timeline, those tweets come out. So I expect this test to fail here with like a 404 kind of thing. Something like that. Why Rust? Because Rust is cool, and because we're able to build the backend and the front end both in Rust by compiling Rust to WebAssembly, which I think is kind of cool. Not found, 200, makes sense. Me timeline. Say timeline. Let's just say me timeline. And now it should fail on that to do. And it does. So how do we actually, how did we like make queries and stuff? We had an authenticate that gives us a user, tweets to create a tweet. Fetch from tweets, which have a user ID. Can you do spas in WASM? Yes, I believe so. That's what we're trying to do, at least. We're using a framework called Seed, which is very much inspired by Elm, if you're familiar with that. So they have like the concept of a model and views and an update function and this sort of setup. So you are able to make single page apps in this way. It's still very much bleeding edge, but it's at least at the level where you can sort of build experimental stuff with it, which is what we're doing. So we need all the tweets where the user ID is that user. Select star from tweets where user ID is user.id. And we need an actual connection pool. Like that. I'm not sure. I believe we actually received a pull request at some point about not needing these clones on the database connection pool. So the database connection pool is internally an arc, I believe. It's a pool, which is an arc, so calling clone on it is not a big deal, but it's not necessary. You can just borrow it as well. Fetch all, I believe. And then you can see query as. And then we had a tweet response. Can't find struct tweet response. So we need to import it, use shared responses, tweet response. There's no field name created at. That's pretty cool. That it basically checks the SQL that we're doing against the type that we map it into and make sure that we don't select too much data. That's really nice. Is WASM at a point where you can access your WASM memory from your JavaScript without copying? Or will it be using zero JavaScript? I intend to use zero JavaScript. We have sort of the basic skeleton of the front end set up, and there's no JavaScript anywhere. I believe there might be. I believe Seed might be generating some JavaScript for us. Like I think this is the extent of it basically. And we didn't write this file ourselves. Seed wrote it for us. But everything that we're writing is basically just Rust. And this is the start function. I'm not quite sure like how. I believe WASM bindgen is a thing that can like generate like interfaces or something, so you can call your Rust code from JavaScript. So I think that is part of what makes it work. But to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. But my goal for this project is to write zero JavaScript, if we can get away with it. Yeah, I think there is like some mandatory JavaScript setup to actually get it going. I imagine at some point in the future that won't be necessary. All right. How do we return a response? Do we have any other endpoints that return a list? I don't think so. No. Because we have this, so token response. Let's see, endpoints. So we have this extension that allows you to turn any, let's see, true response status. Yeah, so build API is implemented for any T where T is serialized. So if you call true response on that, it gets wrapped in an API response, which puts it inside the data. So, but what we need is we have a list of tweet responses. We don't have a single one. I experimented with combining WASM and JavaScript a few times, and the WASM ended up running more slowly than raw JavaScript because of the amount of copying I was doing, but I may have been doing wrong. I'm not sure. I actually think I read somewhere that JavaScript is so heavily optimized these days by browsers that it is actually on par or might be faster in certain cases in JavaScript rather than WASM. Whether it'll be like that in 5-10 years, who knows? I mean, potentially Rust has the potential to go faster. Whether it does today, I'm not actually sure. That's also why at the start of the stream I said that the idea is not that you should build production systems in WASM today. If I were to build an actual website with real users, I would use JavaScript. I would not advise people doing that in in WebAssembly. But for toy projects and like for playing around, it's totally cool. So we need could probably do that. To response. I think that works. What is it complaining about? Expected. What? Because it's nested twice. Because to respond, API response is serializable. So when we call to response on that, it gets nested within another API response. Basically, almost what we want is, can we just say tweets to response? Because technically a list of tweets is also serializable. We can. All right, there we go. I hope there are more jobs in it soon. Yeah, me too. I believe if you're willing to work in crypto, there's tons of jobs, but I'm not willing to do that. I heard very little about Rust. I reckon in Denmark you don't see any job positions for Rust anytime soon. More people doing JS, no, etc. Yeah, if you're willing to do like PHP or C# or JavaScript, there's tons of jobs. Outside of that, it's a bit more slim. I think if you know where to look, you're able to find startups that are more willing to play around with different kinds of modern tech or whatever you want to call it. So this works. Now we should also include tweets from people that you're following. Should be fairly similar. Sees tweets from following from users we are following. So how do you follow someone? We also need Alice. And then Alice actually needs to create these tweets. And then Bob needs to follow Alice. Empty post. All right. Alice follow as Bob. I think that is correct. So I expect this test to fail down here because the body is actually empty. Let's see. Rust is C++ speed, but the compiler and tool chain are better. Yeah, that's what I hear. I've never actually done C++. I did a bit of C back in university. Didn't enjoy it particularly much. But yeah, I really like the sort of unique combination of like the speed and the type system and the great tooling in Rust. I mean, if you're familiar with like JavaScript and C# and Java and PHP, then you already have plenty of job opportunities. So if you're not like excited about learning something new, that's totally cool. Personally, I like digging into languages, and I just happened to discover Rust, and it sort of clicked very well with my brain. Yeah, so the response is actually empty. I would like to fix this error message. It's a bit annoying that it has the body escaped like this. It makes it a bit hard to read. Test helper is 72. But I do think that if you do like, I think if you are into systems programming, whatever that means, like C or C++, I think it makes sense to learn Rust. I have a feeling that Rust is going to be a big deal in the future. Like, there's a lot of companies that are betting on Rust. Microsoft, in particular, is doing a lot of cool stuff in Rust. So I think it's going to stick around. I don't expect it to get huge in like the sort of web space. I think Python or PHP or whatever are going to continue to dominate those spaces. But it's fun. All right, so now that is a bit more readable. That's nice. But we still don't get any tweets, which makes sense. So how are we going to do this? We don't order the tweets currently by created at either. Is that a bug? Ignore. I suppose created at, and I think the internal, like the default ordering is just ID, which happens to coincide with created at as well, which is why we didn't see it. I wonder if we can just do, just to be sure, order by created at, descending, test should still pass. The order was swapped around here. I've never done Lua. I hear it's like sort of the language that's designed to be easy to learn, if that makes sense. And we need to swap these around as well. So how are we going to do it? We could do a union. We should probably also limit the number of tweets that you see. Like make it paginated or something. I wonder if a union is the easiest. It probably is. Union all. How How did the follow table look like? Follower, followee. Cotlin's older brother, full of diseases. Is it like created by the same people? Is it like actually related to Kotlin in some way? So we want all the tweets from the users that you follow. How do we do we did have some follow stuff in here, I believe. Follow, following. Ah, lovely, there's a to-do here. Join follows, where the follow ID is the user and the followee. Oh, I hate this stuff, I always get it backwards. Let's try. What if we say select tweets.id, tweets a text from users, join follows, inner join tweets on tweets user ID equals user's ID. Syntax error near union. Is that not how you do unions in SQL? Select from union. Union. It's because you can't have orders? Huh. I didn't know that. You cannot have an order clause on a union query. I thought it just like ran both queries and sort of stuck the results together. Interesting. Is that enough to make the test pass? I think so. If our follow query is correct. Also, if you're building a one-to-one clone, there's additional stuff to take into consideration speaking of the timeline. Like what? It's not meant to be like a sort of super one-to-one clone, just sort of like whatever we feel like actually building that isn't too much work. We're missing the ordering, that makes sense. Can we do select TID text from, put this guy in a subquery. And then also select created at. Order by t.created at. Does that work? Oh. Descending. does work. Cool. Just for curiosity, I would like to see if you can rewrite this a different way. I'm wondering if you can do it. Can you say? I'm wondering if you can use common table expressions with from self. From follows. And whoops. From self, from we call it from follows. I'm wondering if you can, I'm just curious if you can specify multiple from clauses in this way and actually have it work. If that acts sort of as a union. We made a Facebook 2-to-1 clone. No games that adds bullshit. The timeline was probably the weirdest part because you think about extra data they log. If you send a link on Messenger, a comment transform to their own. Then if it's an unknown website, they'll research what they can about it. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, do you mean like if you send a link on Messenger as a comment, they transform it into their own so they can log it? Yeah, I mean, in terms of like if you click a link on the Twitter timeline, it doesn't go straight there. It goes to Twitter's own thing and then it redirects you. Is that the kind of stuff you mean? I think in terms of just getting a basic timeline working, you need like tweets from yourself and from the people you follow. Column ID is ambiguous. Yeah, it doesn't seem like you can do this because you need to specify up here. You need to specify which ID you actually want. And this syntax also, it does like, it picks like every combination of this one together with every combination of this one, which is not what we want either. We just want one of each. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. Worth a shot. Whoops, and we need the user ID back. User ID. Compile time check queries is so great. Yeah, we're not going to be adding any tracking. All right, pagination. What's the first step? That's to like actually paginate stuff. Let's see. Pagination. So we need to create a whole bunch of tweets. I guess not. We could support customizing the page size. One. Like that. I wonder if we can set query params this way, or if that gets turned into the URL. This is probably just a request. How do you set query params? Query, get the URL query string. And let's just give it a shot and see what happens. Page 1, page size is 2. Then we should only get 2 back. And those two should be 1 and 2. I'm totally gonna look into the hanging stuff. That works. It does actually print more than, so this assert JSON include allows sort of additional stuff in the actual JSON. So if you can imagine that, like this, I believe it actually has ID here as well, but since we don't care about it, we don't include it in the expected JSON, and then this macro just sort of ignores it. So actual is allowed to contain more stuff than what's in expected, and it also means that arrays are able to contain additional elements that we aren't matched on, at least as long as the order of the first 2 are correct. But in this case, there is actually a third one, which we don't want in this case. So it's actually giving us a false positive. In that case, you can use assert JSON EQ, which just takes 2 JSONs, and then it requires them to be exactly the same, which I think is going to be annoying now due to the ID, which I think is there. Yeah. 3 is missing. Yeah, it does complain that ID is missing. So we can't do that. We can say JSON as array unwrap len. It has a data thing. JSON data. That was a weird type error. Expected type found local variable JSON. Yeah, the issue is that like the macro syntax doesn't support what I wrote. That's funny. All right. Wait, no, we do want, yeah, we want include here. Include. Right. So I actually maintain this library, and I have, so if we look at how the assert JSON thing works, I recently received an issue about the fact that the macro doesn't actually take a t where t is serializable. It takes an owned static JSON value, which is annoying when you have things that aren't values. They don't automatically get serialized into JSON. And it also doesn't accept references, which means you need to clone things all the time, which is sort of annoying. And I actually have a PR for fixing this that I did yesterday. So we should be able to switch over to that Git branch, and then when I've actually released this, we can update that dependency. So let's say git I believe you can say branch. Now it should just work, and it does. So basically I changed, if we look at lib, if we look at the one in the PR, so you can see this guy, this is the one that it actually ends up calling inside the library. So it used to take 2 values, but now it just takes 2 generic types that are serialized, both of them, and they're borrows. So that was a fairly easy change and ended up not causing any breakage, which was nice. And turns out we need it ourselves. So did the test pass? It should fail on this assertion down here. And it does. It actually got 6, which makes sense. How do we get the query stuff out of a request? Request query through deserialize. Very nice. Pagination has page. Page size. Derive deserialize. And then we should be able to say request query pagination. Well, that was weird. It was complaining about a syntax error. I think that was just rlef that was a bit slow. Should be able to log it just to see that it actually comes out. That is so annoying. There it is. Limit. How does that work? Need an offset and a limit. Let's just say page is pagination dot page unwrap or page 1. And page size is that. Default page size is what the hell is some weird rendering issues. Page is 20. So the limit I never know the order of, like, order, limit, group by, all those kinds of things. The limit is the page size. Expected by 32. 64. Right, weird that it allows specifying a negative limit. I wonder what that means in Postgres. And then the actual page is offset 3. How does that work? Is that the offset is page minus 1 times page size? Does that make sense? Page minus 1 times page size. So if we're on page 1, then the offset becomes 0. If we're on page 2, the offset becomes 20. I think that's right. I get that, like, in terms of like making the SQL fast, limit and offset is not what you want to do, because if you do like limit 20 offset a million, Postgres has to compute like everything up until that millionth row. If you sort by the IDs, and in like by ID or create it out, whatever, and then instead of using limit and order by, you say like give me everything after the tweet with this ID, that allows Postgres to use some like special indexes to actually do the limiting much faster. That is technically an optimization that we could make. I don't think we're gonna have to do it today. I believe that technique is called key set pagination, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, so that's a thing that you can look up if you're interested. I think this should work, hopefully. Nope, not at all. Internal server error. Offset must not be negative. How could it be negative? Oh my god, Math 101. That works. Very nice. So we should be able to paginate the next page. Let's say this is page 1. You get 3 and 4, still 2. There we go. It would actually be nice if we had an uneven number of tweets. We can do page. I don't think we need that many. I think 5 is fine. 3. Then we get just 5. We should only get 1. There we go. That's pagination. And the timeline, I think. Very cool. I don't think there's anything else that we're missing. Should probably set a max page size just for fun. Max. That was here, min 20. Let's add a test for that. Make 21 tweets. Then if we run it with a page size of 100, we should get back 20. And this should fail because we get back 21. There we go. And now we should pass. And it does. Very nice. I think that was it. Add a timeline. We did have a test without the pagination stuff. Yeah. Great. We'll just annotate that it fixes that issue. This one. All right. I think there's one last thing that I would like to do, and then I think we're actually gonna end the stream here. We've been going for like 2.5 hours. I think that's a pretty good length. And that one thing is, I figure we might as well release this version of this crate, so we can get rid of this like git override thing right here. That also allows you to see that releasing gems is not really scary. I have the code here. The guy did say that, let's see, everything was good, right? Yeah. Let's merge it. That should close the PR. Yeah, so if you have any like last questions before we finish the stream, now's the time. There we go. We will delete the branch. And then I'm thinking this is a 1.1 because it's a new feature, or is it a bug fix? Let's just say it's a feature. Lib. Usually in the root of your crate, to get Rust docs to actually work, you have to include a link to where the docs are located, which means you have to update that whenever you change the version. There is a crate that you can add, which gives you a test to make sure that the version in your cargo.toml and this version actually lines up. There's actually this version sync crate that does that. I don't think I have the version in the README. Nope. Is the README generated from the code, I wonder? Because there's a crate called cargo README that allows you to generate a README from the documentation in your root for your root module. I think so. Let's just make sure the README still looks good. Seems fine. Tests just don't pass. They do. What was the previous version? I usually like to do like a quick search, just to make sure that we didn't forget anything. Do we keep a change log? Yeah. Um, 7.12. Three. 1. That always shows up in the changelog. I guess bumping the dependency is also a good place, good time to do it. Cargo update. So in terms of the Twitter clone that we've been working on, I think we basically have everything that we need in order to get working on the front end. You're able to create users, log in, follow other users, post tweets, load your own timeline. You're not able to load the profile of another user. We should probably do that. Let's add an issue for it. Otherwise, I think we actually have everything that we need to be able to dive into WASM from next stream on, which is pretty exciting. Everything's working. Updated the changelog, the toml file, README. Yep. push it to GitHub, and then I use a crate called cargo release, I believe, which is basically sort of a crate that normally when you publish a crate, you can do a cargo publish, and then it'll publish to crates.io. But this crate will like do a bunch of Git stuff as well. It like add some tags and a couple of other things. It also supports workspaces, so you have multiple crates in the same workspace. It can release all of them at once, which is kind of nice. And I usually use this for convenience. So if you look at the Git log, you can see there's a tag for each release. So that is just cargo release. By default, they'll make they'll bump the version in your cargo.toml to like, in our case, I think it would be like 1.1.1.dev or something like that, which I don't want. So you can just say .no dev version, and then it won't do that. Then we can say yes. Then it's gonna compile the crate and upload it to crates.io, and then it should appear. It appears already here, very nice. And then if you go to docs.rs, if you go to releases and queue, you can see the crates that are sort of queued to have their documentation built. You can see if there's a build failure in your crates documentation. You can see that here. You can see the output of why exactly it failed. It takes usually a couple of minutes for your crate to appear in the queue here, but it should appear soon enough. Until then, I think it just links to like the old documentation. So if you go to documentation, you can see it's 0.3, but as soon as the Rust docs are updated, these links will update as well. So now we should be able to go over here and say this one depends on that guy. And everything should still work. And they hang, very nice. And they do. Sweet. Update. Cool. So I think that is all for the stream today. In case you just joined and you want to check out the stream later, I upload all past streams to YouTube. There's a link in the comments or in the description thing down below. Here you can find all my past streams. You're also very welcome to follow me on the real Twitter, where I always announce ahead of time whenever I do a stream. Otherwise, thanks for joining, people. I had good fun. I think we got pretty good progress on our little web app thing, and I think next week we should probably do the user profile thing that we discovered that we were missing, just so we can show the user's own profile after they log in, or their timeline or something. But otherwise, I think we're basically going to dive into WebAssembly, which will be kind of exciting. So yeah, thank you for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye.